Good evening, welcome to All Strut No Fret one-shots, where I drink a shot and then have a shot at telling you the complete plot of an obscure early modern play in one take, no cuts, no edits. So this evening, the shot is courtesy of this bottle of dodgy amaretto left behind by a friend after a party. So, Craig, I dedicate this episode to you. Thank you very much. And the play is The Tragedy of Mariam, Fair Queen of Jewry by Elizabeth Cary. So, this is a play that was published in 1613, and it's pretty exciting it was published because it was written by a woman. For this same reason, we know that it was not performed on the public stage at that time. However, there is nothing to prove that Elizabeth didn't perform it among her friends or household at home. I mean, why wouldn't you? So, Mariam is the Queen of Judea, and she's married to Herod, King Herod, the King Herod you'd heard of, the one with all the baby massacring and things. So he is straight up the bad guy. You don't need to feel conflicted about that. He is a stage type from the time known as the tyrant. Mariam, however, is a virtuous woman, and herein lies our dramatic conflict. When the play opens, Mariam is alone on stage, and she's just been told that her husband has died. She's crying, she's upset, and she's feeling a bit stupid for crying. She's saying, well, why am I sad? Because when he was here, I wanted him dead, and I was cross about the fact that he had both my brother and my grandfather executed, and I was also pretty cranky about the fact that he told his loyal servant that if he were to ever be killed in action when he was away, that the servant should kill me, which he has very kindly agreed not to do, and I'm grateful for that. So why am I feeling sad about the fact that my husband is dead? And then Mariam's mother, Alexandra, comes in and says, daughter, why are you feeling sad? He killed, grandfather, brother, death. You really should be feeling pretty good about this right now. And then Herod's sister, Salome, comes in. Now, she's more or less the villain of the piece. And she says, well, I see you two are standing around plotting because obviously you can't really be sad about Herod being dead because brother, grandfather, death. And they trade insults for a little while, and then Mariam and Alexandra leave, and Salome gets a rather juicy solo where she talks about how her life is being constrained and frustrated by the fact that she's been married for other people's convenience and usurped by these other women who are getting more attention than her. Now then her lover comes in. He's an Arabian prince, and they talk about what a bummer it is that she's married to a dude she doesn't like anymore, and she suggests to him that he challenge her husband to a duel and that could sort things out. So then lover leaves and husband shows up, and Salome and her husband Constabaris have a pretty frank discussion about how much they despise each other. Then that's the end of Act 1. We get into Act 2 and we're introduced to Pheroras, who is Herod's brother. Pheroras wants to marry Graphina. He's wanted to marry Graphina for a long time, and he's like, Herod's dead, he didn't want us to marry, and now we can marry, yay! And Graphina's a little bit like, yeah, sounds great, but I just don't trust yet that he's really dead. And that's all that happens in that scene. And then we go on to the scene where we see Salome's husband, Constabaris, with two fine young men, the sons of a prince called Babas, something like that. And the problem is he's been hiding them for 12 years because Herod said that they should be executed when their father was, and Constabaris didn't want to do that, so he secretly raised them instead. And then after that, we have a scene where Herod's first wife, Doris, and her now adult son turn up because they've heard that Herod is dead, and they're interested to see what happens with the power vacuum and whether his firstborn son, even though he has been repudiated, might be able to wiggle his way into the throne, or at least some kind of authority. So really all the way through Acts 1 and 2, all we're getting is a series of introductions to people all responding to the news that Herod is dead. Then at the end of Act 2, we get a really quite a tweak of a scene, something a little bit different, because we get a very sexy bromance duel between Salome's lover and her husband. The lover shows up, challenges husband to a duel. Husband says, I'll fight with you on any slight you care to name, except on behalf of my wife, because she's not worth it. And then it's like, how dare you say she's not worth it? And they fight, and the husband wounds the lover, but not mortally, and they have a very bromancy little conversation about, oh, I must take you off to my surgeon to look after those wounds because you're so brave. No, you're so brave. No, you're so brave. No, you're so brave. And that's the whole of Act 2. Now, when we get to Act 3, Salome, who you remember is Herod's sister, meets her other brother with the unpronounceable name, and she upbraids him for marrying Graphina without the blessing of Herod. And while they're having this conversation, the news comes in that, twist, Herod isn't dead. And the brother's upset because now he thinks that his marriage is going to cause trouble. And Salome says, I'll strike you a deal. I will speak on behalf of the virtue of your marriage to Herod if you tell Herod that my husband has been secretly raising these two sons of his enemy. He will then have my husband executed, but I won't be blamed for it, and I'll be free to marry my lover, and you'll be free to marry yours. So he agrees to that. He thinks it's a great idea. And then Mariam is next told of Herod's return, and she has a complete meltdown freak out because even though she's just been weeping over his death and remembering the time when they were in love, she's now brutally brought back to the reality of the fact that she really does not want to be married to this man, and she swears absence from his bed. Now, by Act 4, we finally get to meet Herod. So he rocks up talking about nothing but how in love with Marion he is because she's so wonderful. But then his brother shows up. The plan falls out exactly the way Salome wanted. He tells them tells Herod about the two secret sons, and Herod condemns Constabarus and the two young men to be executed. So far, so good. And then finally, Mariam shows up, and Herod's like, my darling, I'm so happy to see you. Why are you wearing black? Why are you looking so grumpy? And she is, because I'm feeling, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling the black. I'm feeling the grumpy. And I have abjured your bed, and it's more or less over between us. So while they're having a bit of back and forth on that, Salome has arranged for a servant to come in with a poisoned drink. Now the idea is that the drink will be revealed as poisoned and Mariam will be blamed. The servant has been primed to say that it was Mariam's idea. And the servant then suggests that the reason Mariam probably wanted to have Herod poisoned is that the Sohamus, the loyal servant who didn't execute Mariam even though he'd been told to, the servant suggests that the fact that he told Mariam of Herod's plans for her death, no doubt out of his great love for her, was the reason that they conspired to poison him. Herod has a hissy fit. He orders Sohamus's execution, and then after a little he orders Mariam's too. And she doesn't say much here. She more or less just says, well, people are plotting. What can I say? You won't believe me. And she's taken off to be executed. Now, as soon as he's got her out of the way, of course, he begins to have doubts about whether he should execute her. And that's when Salome turns up and does the whole needling of... they go through this whole series of, well, how shall I kill her? Well, you could behead her. You could drown her. You could set her to the fire. until Salome more or less just gets exasperated and said, well, fine, let her live then. And Herod's like, no, can't do that. Okay, well, I guess she's going to be executed. So that's agreed. So before their executions, we have a scene where we see Constabaris and the two young men going stoically and heroically to their executions. And then we have a scene of Mariam going stoically and heroically to her execution. And that's what the real crux of the play. Mariam has these two things. First, when she hears Herod actually is alive, and now at this point on her way to her execution, where she says, I know I could enchain him with a smile. She admits that if she chose to, if she made the effort, she could win him back through behaving in a loving way, in a submissive way. But she says, I cannot frame disguise, nor never taught my face to look dissenting from my thought. So her whole shtick is that she can't do what women are supposed to do in these situations, which is dissemble in order to serve their own interests. And the tension in the play overall is simply about this thing that women for centuries, particularly under religious governance, had to deal with, which is the paradox of how do you be virtuous if the only virtue that counts for you as a married woman is to obey and serve your husband if your husband is an asshole. So if your husband is not virtuous and you want to be virtuous, is it more unvirtuous to disobey him or more unvirtuous to obey him? It's the eternal paradox and the deepest philosophical question at the core of this piece. Now, at this point, everyone who should be executed has been executed, and the executioner comes on and describes in detail the process to Herod, who swings wildly between admitting that that was what he ordered and denying that he could have done something so outrageous, so reckless, so detrimental to the beauty of the world to take Mariam out of it. And that's really where he concludes. It includes with Herod getting a big shouty, hissy fit solo speech and the perplexed question left hanging in the air about what a virtuous married woman is supposed to do in order to be virtuous. So thank you, Elizabeth Cary, for getting this, for writing this, for getting this published, and for leaving us this little distilled jewel of a philosophical question for all women who feel themselves trapped between conflicting duties. I might have another one of those.